Hey, it's Tess, content creator, model, presenter, and host of the Tess Talks podcast, on a mission to ignite curiosity. Today's episode is a truly beautiful one. I'm joined by renowned meditation teacher and founder of the open app, Manoj Dias. Together, we explore the real power of mindfulness beyond all the buzzwords and how it can genuinely transform our everyday lives. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, dysregulated, or maybe just craving a deeper sense of calm. Then this conversation is definitely one that will meet you exactly where you are. We talk about why meditation isn't about fixing yourself, but about becoming more aware. We explore duality, authenticity, and how to stop letting the past define your present. Manoj also shares his thoughts on integrating spirituality in a way that feels real, relevant, and personal. I really hope this episode leaves you feeling more grounded, more spacious, and equipped with insights that really help to create the right conditions to continue to thrive. I know it did for me anyway. Now, before we go on, I need to apologize. We had a few issues with our audio on this episode, specifically my microphone, which is fine. I encourage you to push through because Manoj is the one with all the pearls of wisdom. So let's get into it. Let's get curious.
When I look at you, Manoj, I feel like you really live your life, what seems like in your total dharma, like your life's mission, your purpose. But this podcast is all about igniting curiosity. So I'm curious to know, how did you first get into mindfulness and meditation?
Good question. I don't think it was a conscious decision, actually. In retrospect, when I look back now, it wasn't like I decided one day, I'm like, oh, I need to meditate. Or there was definitely not as many Instagram ads or apps or teachers that were kind of vying for my attention. I fell into it. It was just like a random thing because, I was looking at different ways to get over. At that time, I had anxiety. I was going through an eating disorder. I had ADHD. I was misdiagnosed. I was taking, all these different prescription medications. And I was in a very weird kind of headspace and getting to the end of my, what do they call it? End of my wick, because I was burning the candle at both ends, basically. And it wasn't until a friend told me to come check out a yoga class one day that I went, and he wasn't teaching yoga. He was really teaching meditation, this teacher, that it really sparked my curiosity because, he was saying a lot of things in that particular class. For example, you are not your thoughts was the central thing he was saying. And there was a moment as he was saying all of these different, phrases where I started to notice all my thoughts. And I thought that was a really interesting moment in my journey when he was saying, you are not your thoughts. And then I'm having all these random thoughts. And then there was me noticing the thoughts. And I think it was the first time it clocked in my head that if I'm seeing the thoughts themselves, I don't have to become the thought. Because at that point, when you're anxious, when you're going through a lot of things, if a thought pops into your mind going, oh no, you're messed up or you can't do this, you tend to not have this level of awareness to be like, oh, it's just a thought. Back then, every thought that pumped into my mind, I did it,
You identified with.
Identify with it, exactly, yeah. But there was this moment in class where I was noticing it. And one of the thoughts was, you're a loser. That was like a central thought. And I remember seeing that thought and I'm like, that's interesting. And there was something that sparked in me that night. And the next day I came back and I remember having the best night's sleep. And the next day and next day and next day. And I kind of became addicted to going to meditation. But my life just started to unfold at that point. I started to sleep really well. I started to become more present in my life. My relationship with my parents, my family started to improve. And then over time, my relationship with myself improved. I started to speak to myself with more kindness and I had more clarity in my mind and I was making wiser decisions. I stopped eating bad food and there were periods where I drank a lot and then I cut all that down and, eventually stopped drinking and every now and again I'll drink. And So anyway, the way I kind of reconcile it is that I started making wiser decisions. And when I was making wiser decisions, I was becoming happier.
There's so much to unpack in that alone, but it's so interesting because you're so right. Like, it's such a domino effect. Once you start and once you like fall into it, you see everything else in your life, kind of the catalyst unfolds of all of it. It becomes this whole journey. But I'm curious for you, like, was this something that was totally new to you? Or I'm aware that you grew up in Sri Lanka. Was this something that you kind of grew up being around and being already aware of meditation and mindfulness? Or was it a total new experience for you in your 20s?
I think spirituality wasn't new to me because I was surrounded by monks and priests and temples and ceremonies. And that definitely sparked a curiosity about something that was greater than myself. You know, Buddhism, we don't really identify with a God. We think it's more a practice that everyone can identify with and connect to. But I definitely was, from a young age, curious about something bigger than myself. So that wasn't new or unfamiliar in any way, but the ability to train my mind, that was definitely a new concept to me. Like I thought, you know, for a long time, this is the mind that I was born with and this is what I have to deal with. And all these neuroses and complications that I have is just what I have. And that's my luck in life, you know. I didn't realize I could rewire my brain. I didn't realize I could experience things different to what I was experiencing. And so then at a point when I was doing this class, I had this realization that, oh, my mind is causing the majority of my suffering right now. My thoughts are. And so if I want to retrain my mind, if I wanted to rewire my thinking patterns, then I had to sit down and I had to notice my mind. And that involved me meditating. And so once I realized that was my gateway to feeling better, then I went pretty crazy on that and really gave myself to it. It's
funny how life has a way of like bringing us to these places. Like obviously some cultures, like you've grown up around lots of mindfulness, spirituality, all of that, so it kind of comes naturally. But I feel like more so in like our Western culture, there's a lot less of that. And I personally believe that like as children and as babies, we have like such a strong like intuition and like this connection to source because we're still so pure, but then we're like taught to kind of suppress all of that and we get so caught up in this rat race. And it seems like such this common story that it takes like some specific moment or this sense of like lack or emptiness or maybe something traumatic that starts us on our journey or ignites our curiosity in like this realm.
Yeah.
So for you touched on having anxiety and being in a place where you're really riddled by your thoughts and ADHD. So what was that experience like for you and what do you think was the catalyst of that stuff in your life?
Yeah, I think you must have had this experience when you look at your newborn's eyes for the first time, or you have this moment where you connect and you're like, wow, like if this is not God or if this is not something bigger than myself, like what is it? You know, it's moments like that when you come close to death that you surrender your boundaries and all your barriers to believing these things kind of tend to dissolve. And it's in those moments like that for me. It was like, you know, I was at my wit's end. I tried everything. I went to doctors, psychologists, different therapists. And this was, 17, 18 years ago where mental health wasn't as big as it is now. And there was that moment of kind of surrender. I'm like, I don't know, like what's going to happen to my life. And then, it was, I look back now, there were all these strange circumstances that started to happen. Firstly, a friend who I didn't know all that well had come to this class. That was the first coincidence. And then I emailed this teacher and I said, hey, I'm going through all of this. And he said, I've been waiting for you. Come and see me on Thursday.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, like how does he know this? Did my friend say something? But turns out he hadn't. And then it was just the right words at the right time that he said. And I don't know if there is a God. It's all a hypothesis, for all of us as teachers. We don't know. And I would argue even scientists don't know. These are all hypotheses that we're working with. But there's something much greater than ourselves. That one I believe in because I know biologically how from a health perspective, we need connection to others. We need connection to people outside ourselves. So a really long-winded way of saying, there are strange things that happen that we don't really understand. And those strange things probably led me to where I am today.
And sometimes like those strange things, I feel like sometimes when you start getting really, really connected with yourself, it's like it kind of reaffirms everything that you are saying, that you kind of do feel like there is like a higher power or energy or God or whatever you want to call it, that it kind of is looking over you, because you kind of feel more and more connected to that space as you go on, whether someone wants to call that enlightenment or going inwards or whatever. But I do think the more you deepen your practice, it's like you kind of feel that there is this higher power there.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100% would agree with that. And I think there was a time early on in my career as a meditation teacher where I wasn't always someone that believed in things outside of myself. So I was pretty rational for the first half of my life. I looked at the science when it came to pretty much everything. I looked at the research. I looked at who had said it. And now I've been teaching for like 17, 15, 16 years maybe. And in my experience, we can't discount the fact that there couldn't be those things, you know? And then again, those experiences with kids, you and I both have kids. When you have those moments, there is just this realization there has to be more than just this, because what else am I seeing right now? You know,
sheer magic of them coming onto this planet,
right?
Yeah,
and moments like that, and you hear this all the time in the news, like you know, people being saved by, even on Instagram, you see these people, all of a sudden a dog jumps on them and it stops a car running over them.
Yeah,
like these moments of like, what, like. It's bizarre. And you know, my wife is she's a painter and she studies quantum physics, and she always argues with me. Is like, yeah, like there is something beyond this, you know. So
you guys can have some very interesting conversations.
Yeah. She talks more than I do, so it's mainly me listening to her.
Space.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. So was there one like pivotal moment for you, one transformative experience, or was it just this ongoing deepening your connection and then stepping into your teacher training practice, your yoga teacher training practice, and just delving deeper? Like, how did that unfold for you?
I think it was a bunch of little things over time that gave me a lot of evidence that this is working. But it wasn't until my first Vipassana with my teacher, silent meditation retreat, where like, and we talk a lot about, you know, if there's something beyond ourselves, it was that experience of like myself dissolving into nothingness and feeling connected to everything. And it was in Bali. It was at a place called Cinnamon near this incredible volcanic rock. We were meditating for like 15 hours a day. And I was going through a lot because I was still on medication and I was, you know, still trying to figure all that out. But I was so deep in my practice at that point. And then I remember just one afternoon meditating, looking at the mountains, and I would look over and I would see like a little grasshopper, and there was just so much, it sounds really weird even saying it, like so much love and compassion for that grasshopper. And then looking at the trees and feeling like I was not separate from the trees, but I was connected to the trees. And then looking at all the other students that were there and just feeling so much warmth and tenderness for them. And it was a realization of like, oh, I'm going through all of these things, but so is this person. Like they've got their own issues and sadness and grief and pain, and so are these people. And then when you reconcile all that, you're like, oh, there isn't a difference because I'm also going through those things. And that barrier between me and this other person kind of dissolved, and you're like, yeah, we're just these intricate particles separated by these bodysuits that we wear, but we experience everything on a similar level, right? Whether it's pain, grief, love, fear, we all experience that, but in different ways. So that was a pretty pivotal point where I'm like, oh yeah, this shit works. I'm like, something has changed inside of me. And I remember coming back to Melbourne, and my perspective had forever shifted. Like the way I was seeing things myself had forever changed.
So to my knowledge, you were working in finance at the time. How is that transition from being in a more of a corporate role, transitioning into taking a complete leap and dedicating your life to this work, two very polarizing industries. How did you know that that was the right thing to do? How did you know the right time? How did that unfold?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot from people wanting to become teachers.
Yeah.
And it's a great question. I think, at the time I was working in marketing within the finance industry, and I always questioned what my purpose was in life. I'm like, is this it? Like, is this really what I'm meant to be doing with the world, with myself? And why, if that is the case, why am I so just agitated and frustrated and confused and doubting this the whole time? And then that was always there. Like I succeeded in a way. I was pretty successful at a young age, but I always had this feeling of this isn't it. Like, and what is it? This isn't it. What is it? And like I said to you, I fell into being a student. And just like I fell into being a student, I kind of fell into being a teacher because the teacher I was studying with said 10 years. You have to be with me for 10 years before I'll ever give you the opportunity to teach. And I was like, okay. And back then it wasn't cool or sexy to be a meditation teacher. So I was like, okay, I don't care. I was going to the races every year, and I was still going out. So I'm like, I can't afford to do that on like a teacher's salary.
Yeah.
But it was a girl I was dating at the time who was a ballerina, and she was about to be a yoga teacher. And she said to me, hey, I'm doing this yoga teacher training. Why don't you come and do it? And I think I wanted to impress her at the time. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'll come and I'll do it with you. And I went and did the teacher training, and I loved it. And then at the end of the teacher training, they get you to teach, a little bit. And the studio that I did it at, they were like, do you want a job here? And I'm like, do I want a job here? I don't know. Like, I'd just gone back to work after a period off. I started teaching one class, and then 2 classes, and then 3 classes. And that was probably the limit. But I had this realization where I was going into the studio and teaching, and I'm just feeling so alive. And I think more importantly, myself. Like, I felt like I was just able to be me. And then I was going into this corporate environment, and I had to armor up, suit up, put on this face, and sell this product that I had no interest in selling and that I didn't care about. And at some point, I was like, make maybe $16,000 to $30,000 a year, make a high 6-figure salary. Like, what do I do? Like,
it's a big gamble to take, isn't it?
It's a really big gamble to take. But I think I was young and dumb enough. I was like, I just want to follow what feels good right now. And I followed that, and I became a teacher, and that led to a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, you have to take a leap of faith at some point.
And it's amazing to see how it has unfolded for you and how your career has progressed over the last decade. I've been watching it and seeing over the last few years how you've launched Open App and also, I believe, Open Studio in Venice, which I think is absolutely remarkable. And I love Open, and specifically love your meditations. There's something about your voice I just find gets me so deep and so connected. You've definitely got the skill. The skill comes very naturally.
It's the Australian accent. That's what it is.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, feels relatable. So let's delve into the app. How did that come about for you, and why did you choose to do an app?
Yeah, you were there very early on for the A-Space journey. Yeah. So some context for those of you listening, I was teaching for a few years. And as you know, you can't really make an amazing career as a yoga, meditation, breathwork, whatever teacher. And then I had a partner, and like we were thinking about the next stage of our relationship. And I'm like, well, can't really look after a family if I'm just teaching classes all over town. Like I need to sink into something. And, talking about higher power stuff, this was like another moment of chance where a friend of mine invited me to come and speak at his, like it was entrepreneurs organization. And there's a whole bunch of business leaders. They meet quarterly and they have like an inspirational talk, is what he said. And I went there and I shared a bit about my story, and I led them in some practices. And then at the end of that, 4 of them were like, that's amazing. Come and do that at my work. And so I did it at their work, and they were like, come back. And kept on spiraling from there. I'm like, well, if there's a desire for meditation right now, it's obviously not done in a way that feels relatable at that time. I'm like young and I think this is contemporary and I can do it in a contemporary way. So me and a friend decided to get together and start like a little pop-up studio called A Space. Pop-up in the sense that we would launch once a month, we'd do a workshop. But we'd also do like a B2B thing where we'd go into businesses and do that. And then that kind of spiraled into the studio where we took 2 credit cards out and maxed them out and converted it was a back room closet for a psychology practice into a studio. And you were there very early on to that and came in. I remember we met there. But then
it's a great little space.
It was cute. Yeah, Collingwood, yeah. And it was great. But then, he ended up leaving, my co-founder, a few years later. And then COVID happened and the whole industry kind of shut down. But I still had faith that there was something there. So I kept pursuing that. And then in 2020, I started consulting with other companies all around the world. And one of the brands that reached out was Open, which at the point was a pretty small breathwork studio out of San Francisco. And they had gone through some fundraising and they had dreams of launching an app and studios. And I started consulting with them. And then me and the 2 co-founders were like, we actually like working together. Why don't you join and we'll kind of merge A Space and Open. You'll be the 3rd co-founder. And that's what I did. So I left in 2020 in the blaze of COVID.
Great time to get out of Australia.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a great time to be anywhere, but definitely was a good time to leave here. And then, since then I've been working on creating an app and launching studios. And we have our first studio in Venice. Our second one is opening soon in Silver Lake in LA. And then I just moved to New York to open a New York studio.
It's so exciting. And I just really love the brand because there's also there's a fair few meditation apps out there and I've tried lots of them. But I do think there is something about Open, as you said, it is contemporary. It has such a variety of content on there, but the quality of it is so high. I think in the past I've struggled with apps to really find that depth and to go deep. But I just think the quality of teachers on there and content that you really can really deepen your spiritual practice with this app. And that's quite rare to find.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. It means a lot. No, I think what I've learned over the last almost 20 years is that people want more. They don't know where to go to get more. And, like we were talking about, there are so many different lineages, practices, backgrounds. And what we've tried to do with Open is we've looked at the whole gamut of wisdom and we're like, what is the crossover? What is this religion saying and what's science saying and where does that intersect? And so then it's a very secular practice. So it's something for everyone. And then we do it in a way where it speaks to the artistic nature of the practice and it draws you in. So there's something beautiful there. There's something ritualistic about practicing either in the app or in a studio.
I found it interesting as well on your website. You wrote it's a holistic approach for longevity. So what do you mean by that? How do you see this as relating to longevity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different ways, but one of our main modalities is breath work, and either through functional breathing or through more active hyperventilation breath or down-regulated breath, we're starting to see how important that is in terms of longevity, right? The breath is really the sign of how well you are at the moment. And even in this moment, if, I'm breathing heavily through my chest, I'm in a more sympathetic state, I'm in a more stressed out state. Whereas if I notice that, with meditation, you're able to first become aware of it, but then you actively can change your breathing to change your physiological state. And so the more you do that over a period of time, the more it improves your longevity, the more it improves not only health span, but lifespan as well. So that we integrate with movement practices. Previously yoga was the thing. And if you didn't want to do yoga, you would go to a strength training gym. And if you didn't want to do strength training, you'd go to a Pilates studio. But now with Open, it's like, what if we bring those things into the one experience? So over a period of 40 minutes, you might be stacking a Pilates inspired workout with some strength-based moves, with breathing, to music, with wisdom.
Holistic approach.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I know Joe Dispenza's groups a lot, this research that was done on our telomeres. And there was some research done that showed like meditation for a certain amount of time can actually extend the length of your telomeres, which are the protective caps on the end of our chromosomes, which shorten as we age. But it's really fascinating seeing the science coming out now showing how much on a physiological level this kind of work actually is improving our health and our lifespan.
Yeah, on a neurological level as well, because our frontal cortex tends to, I think, I forgot the age. Actually, maybe I'm going to make it up.
Make it up.
No,
no one told us to it.
I don't want to research it like commenting on this. But our frontal cortex tends to shrink the older that we get, and I think the research said like from 21 it begins to slowly shrink, and so one of the ways that we can extend that out, not necessarily grow it, although neurogenesis is a thing with meditation, is to constantly pay attention intentionally. And meditation is one of those ways that we can do that.
I also wanted to touch on, because I feel like this is a very common theme throughout people I know who want to enter the space of wellness and for their business. How do you find working in the wellness space, but then bringing in that more business side, the finance side, the marketing side, and that more like pragmatic side to it, which a lot of people often find as this polarization and feel this conflict between promoting and monetizing something that's supposed to be like spiritual, connected, mindful. How do you find that like duality?
Yeah, it's embracing the duality really, and recognizing the duality is part of our existence, and we hold those questions with a lot of wisdom and clarity. We don't. I don't try to gloss over it. I don't try to abuse it. I try to hold it with a lot of tenderness, because these are practices that have been around since 2,500 years ago, if not longer. But in order for it to reach more people, and this is especially from the Buddhist context, we have this theory or this concept of skillful means. It's like using whatever we can to bring more people to the Dharma, or to bring more people to the practice. And sometimes it's a beautiful visual concept that will bring people to practice. Sometimes it's music that will, or like James Blake joining the team, that'll draw people in. But ultimately the goal and the vision is get them to practice. And so I think it's very hard to compete with companies that have billions of dollars of venture-backed funding for the average person. But I think it's just being also authentic to yourself. The branding of Open is a reflection of me. Like I identify with that because I like design, I like architecture, I like fashion. And for me to do anything but that would be inauthentic. And so I also hold that as a truth. Like if I'm going to be a teacher, do I have to be who I'm not in order to people to think, I'm legit? I'm like, no, I don't want to wear harem pants. Like, no, I don't want to grow my hair out. Yes, I like wearing nice shoes. So yeah, I think it's just holding all of those dualities with a lot of awareness and tenderness.
A quick word on today's episode sponsor, Wanderlust. If you're anything like me, life can feel non-stop with work, mum life, social plans. It can be a lot, and in the middle of it all, it can be tough to feel grounded and relaxed. That's where traditional support can really help. Wanderlust high-strength ashwagandha is traditionally used in Ayurvedic medicine as an adaptogen, which helps the body adapt to stress. It calms the mind and eases nervous tension. It's a high-potency, plant-based formula made with clean ingredients and a strong focus on quality. So if you're moving at full speed, this is your reminder to take a breath, slow down, and embrace the balance in the busiest of moments. And meditation plus Wanderlust supplements, it really doesn't get any better. Discover Wanderlust high-strength ashwagandha at Chemist Warehouse. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I think in this day and age, as you said, it was very different when you first started your teacher training, but now it's so much more common. People are more interested in it. So I think the fact that it is reaching more people around the world, all it's doing is creating a better world and a more healed world, which is what we need. So I think it's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think if I can add one thing, somewhat controversial.
Add what you want.
I think with as wellness begins to expand and as longevity and as preventative healthcare, all this stuff begins to get bigger and bigger, what's going to be more important is actual science-backed and verified practices. And not just science-backed, but practices that have been around for a long time, that have stood the test of time.
Yeah.
It's the wellness and meditation industry is like any other industry. It can be co-opted, it can be abused, it can be overcapitalized. So for anyone looking to get into it, just make sure you're doing something legit. And for people that are interested in finding out more, like do your research. Like I think that's an important part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, unfortunately. I mean, it comes with any industry, but you definitely do see it. And the monetization of it and the different programs and things pop up online. So you're so right, having that credibility. I think what's really cool is that your team has offered all our listeners a promo code, which I'll put in the show notes, so everyone can jump onto Open App for free, which is really cool, and trial it out. Because yeah, it's just fantastic. And at least they know what they're getting is legit.
Right. Well, I mean, also test it out. If it's not for you, then that's great.
Totally.
I think we in this industry of spirituality or meditation or whatever it is, people tend to blindly believe influences, right? That's something that I've been really reflecting on myself, especially with the rise of TikTok and stuff like that. And so I think one aspect of spiritual practice is really important. And the Buddha actually said this, is don't believe anyone, no matter what they've said, unless it resonates with your own level of understanding and truth. And so we have agency around that. So we can critique it, we can question it. And we don't have to blindly accept what's out there, no matter how big the person is talking about it.
That's so true. Everyone's truth is different, isn't it? And I love what you said earlier about the ethos of open, because it's how I've always looked at my own personal practice. And that's not that I want to follow a certain tradition or practice a religion. It's that I love to look at all of them and choose like the facets from each one that kind of works for me and resonates for me. And it might be like a hybrid, like multiple practices or multiple cultural traditions or whatever. And I think that's so beautiful, because then we're kind of choosing our own journey. We're not living the path of another's, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really great way of doing it. I think what it does is it gives the person agency, you know, and like my personal path is the Buddhist path, but it's not for everyone, right? And I think I've over time gotten so much of an appreciation for what the other paths tend to offer that why would I say my way is the best way? Because I know like other ways are beautiful and they've helped so many of my friends. But if you look really closely at these different paths, they say similar things in different aspects of, you know, life, whether it comes to how we're in relationships or how we are in work or how we treat ourselves. There, if you can synthesize all of this information, you can see that there is overlap and crossover, and that overlap and crossover is really what's interesting to me.
I really want to delve into how you really see mindfulness, meditation, breath work being able to help people, because I think a lot of the experiences that you had early on, that you referenced earlier, such as anxiety, ADHD, certain stories that we tell ourselves and repeat, they're very, very common experiences. And often it can feel really, really hard to get out of them, especially when you're really deep in certain storytelling or grief or trauma. So how do you see these practices for anyone listening that finds themselves in that kind of position to help them to get started? Where do they go?
Yeah, I think the first thing to realize is that you are not these experiences. Like just the same way my teacher told me I'm not my thoughts. These days, we can be over-identified with our conditions. So if someone says, I have ADHD, it's like, oh, that just means I don't have to pay attention, or it just means I can't do that. If I'm depressed, so this is how I am, or I'm, you know, grieving. And those are real things and real experiences, but we can tend to over-identify with them. So much so that they become our identity. And we don't recognize that the nature of our experience, the nature of reality is that everything is impermanent, right? Like in one way, shape, or form, that will end. And if you can recognize that what you're going through is an anxious moment and you're not an anxious person, then that gives you so much agency to be able to control the next part of your day. And that's like, for me, the place to begin is to recognize that is impermanent. From there, you need to do the work. And the work is often uncomfortable and difficult. And some people should definitely consult doctors and therapists getting into this work, especially if they have hyper intense anxiety, or if they're going with some PTSD related stuff. There are certain practices that people should avoid. But in general, developing an awareness practice is really beneficial. And awareness simply means that at this moment, I'm having this thought. At this moment, I'm having this physical sensation. At this moment, I'm breathing and I know I'm breathing. And it's so simple. And that just gives you agency. And then from that agency, you can seek out a teacher, you can seek out a particular direction, a path, and then just put in the work, and I don't often like sharing my condition because it's not a like for like example, because everyone it's different, as you mentioned. But I think my experience taught me that you have to get to a certain point in your life where your healing, quote unquote, is the most important thing you can do. And then there is a point where the healing is finished, because sometimes we can always think that we need to be fixed, we need to be healed, and
also get addicted to the healing. You see that story sometimes where people get really stuck in the healing that they almost start identifying with that, so that they can't exit that part of their life.
And the strange paradox is, like many traditions tell you, you are born great and perfect and you're okay. You just have to remember that. And it's the remembering part that we're trying to heal, right? It's not us. And so, it's just putting in the work, being gentle with yourself and recognizing that the journey is the healing. It's not the destination, because we're all going to have shit to work on. Like I'm always working on myself, but I don't think I need healing necessarily. I just think I need to be more present to my partner, or, I need to be a better boss at times, or, respond to my emails, and that's just part of life. But I think it's first developing an awareness practice, recognizing that whatever you're experiencing is impermanent, and then be willing to put in the work.
I love what you said earlier, because I always found that one thing with certain practitioners that I always found concerning is them labeling you as having anxiety. You have depression, you have anxiety, and that's when it feels like it becomes part of you, it becomes that permanence. Yeah. So I love that you said that it's even that real simplicity of just seeing it as I am experiencing anxiety, I am experiencing depression, which is very normal human emotions
100%.
to experience. We're all going to experience them at some point in our life.
Yeah. And I think it's important to normalize the fact that it is hard. Like life is challenging. And sometimes things are hard and you get sad, and that sadness is healthy and it's normal. It doesn't mean you're this label.
Broken, yeah.
Right. But, I think we've gone from not talking about mental health to over talking about mental health a little bit. And there's definitely demographics that don't talk enough about it, like men and all that for sure. But this idea of labeling our diagnoses as our identification can definitely, in the long term, in my experience, be problematic.
I see that a lot with the ADHD diagnosis currently. I kind of feel like every man and their dog is being diagnosed with ADHD, and I wonder how much of it is overdiagnosis. I wonder how much of it is because of a lack of connection to self. I wonder how much of it is because we're so distracted on our phones all the time, and that's creating this sense of inability to focus and concentrate and these kind of ADHD traits. You said that you were diagnosed with it. What's your experience of that?
So my experience of it was actually, for me, great to go through the process of going and doing the testing, and then the doctor saying, okay, this is what you have. Because up until that moment, I'm like, why is my brain just like this? And so at the time, it was kind of great. But, I also went through the process of taking medication, and the medication over a period of time did probably, for me, I'm not saying it's bad for everyone, but for me, did more harm than good. But I've seen it do more good than harm in other people. So for me, it was a good thing to recognize this is what was happening. But that was close again to 20 years ago. Now, this is before even smartphones, I think, actually. So now we live in a much more distracted world, and there could be a whole bunch of different inputs that are creating distraction. It might not just be our hereditary genetics that predispose us to distraction or hyperactivity. It could be our environment. It could be if we struggle with a certain boss, maybe it's hard for us to finish our work. If we have a pretty toxic home environment, maybe it's hard for us to focus at home if we are not getting enough sleep. And there are so many different, factors these days. I don't know what the actual uptick in ADHD diagnosis is, but I also think that we can tend to overdiagnose a lot. And that's just, I've seen this with my students. I've seen this with myself. I've seen this with friends. It's that sometimes you have to create the right conditions for you to thrive. And it's like a relationship, right? You go into the right relationship, everything feels better normally, naturally. Whereas if you're in a relationship where you're struggling with everything is a struggle, it's like sleeping is a struggle. When you're with your friends, you're just complaining about it. I think causes and conditions play a big part in this.
So true. I love that. So really coming back to basics and seeing what our environment is like, reconnecting to self through our practices.
Yeah.
And potentially finding a practitioner to support us through it. I think they're all
Yeah.
tips. So what about for someone who feels like that they are struggling to connect to their meditation practice, or they feel like they can't meditate, they can't do it? What do you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you can meditate. You trust me, if I can do it, and I wasn't someone that had a natural talent for this. I had ADHD, I had anxiety, I was on medication, I was addicted to stuff. Like, it wasn't easy for me at all. But if you are willing to put in the work, then it can be life-changing. And sometimes you need a new teacher. Sometimes you need a new method or technique. Sometimes you need the right conditions in order to do it. But or sometimes maybe meditation's not for you. Maybe the first step is, functional breathing, getting your breathing correct so that your nervous system is calm enough to be able to sit and meditate.
That's really interesting, because my partner always says to me, running is my meditation. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not really meditating. I know it slows your thoughts down, but I feel like you're not honoring the deepness and the depths that you can go to when you go into stillness. That's what I personally believe meditation truly is at its core. So obviously it's different from person to person, but I think that's really interesting that you say everyone can do it. Maybe it's starting somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think I also say that for what it's worth to my friends.
Yeah.
I'm like, running isn't meditation because, we
have this debate all the time.
Yeah. It's a mindful activity. Sure. It gives you flow states. You feel good because of the endorphins and everything, but it's a very different technique to meditation. And I think that distinction is really important, because you don't meditate to feel good. You meditate to be free. And you don't go running necessarily to feel free. You might go running to just feel good. And so if you understand that, for me, it gave me a lot of clarity to know that, okay, this shit is really hard and I'm going to stick with it because I want to be free of my thoughts. And it gave me so much momentum and juice to get through those hard times. Whereas if I was always trying to feel good, and trust me, meditation, you don't feel good. Like, a lot of the time, if you start to feel better, it's because you start to feel bored, right? But it's never like this really euphoric experience. And you have those moments for sure, like when you're on retreats, or that moment I had with in Bali. But the majority of the time, it's not that. It's just noticing your mind, noticing your thoughts, non-judgmentally coming back to an anchor, or feeling emotions and that being okay.
It's so interesting, because you're so right. I mean, I had this one experience though when I was meditating, and obviously I've done quite a bit of meditation over my life. But I had one experience where, because I often found the deeper I would go, I would feel more calm and more grounded and more disconnected from the physical and more internal. And I always felt so comforted and safe in that space. But then one time I was meditating, and all of a sudden my heart started racing and my hands started shaking, and I felt this huge wave of anxiety come through my body. And I was in a class, and I got quite fearful because I thought, am I about to have a panic attack? And everyone's still around me, and wasn't sure exactly how to get out of it and trying to get back into my physical. But it was such an intense and overwhelming experience that I think in that moment I also really realized how transformative and powerful meditation can be. What do you think about that in terms of healing ourselves or experiencing these things when we are deep in meditation?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I've had similar experiences, not in meditation, where my body is kind of taken over, like my physiological body, and I've had like a panic attack or anxiety. what we learn in meditation is that we can have these physiological responses, but again, we don't identify with them, right? So I can be in full awareness and have a panic attack. Thankfully, I haven't had one for a long time, but I do get anxiety from time to time. And now I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. Like my heart's beating really quickly, or, interesting. My palms are getting really kind of sweaty. I'm having these really negative thoughts right now, but it's in like full awareness. And, Pema Chodron, one of my favorite teachers, often talks about the sky and the weather. And you recognize that, these experiences, whether it's the hands, whether it's your heart, whether it's your gut churning, it's like weather passing through a sky, right? Like you're just noticing them, but you are not those things, right? You're not that feeling that all of a sudden overcomes you and like, this is who I am. She says you're the sky. And that gives you a much more open, spacious view of your experience. Because then if you are the sky, this is like a temporary experience. So you can just watch it come, watch it go. And there's no identification from that, right? You just allow it to be. And the second thing is, I don't often use the word heal because it gives this connotation that there's something that needs to be fixed almost, right? And like, yes, on a practical level, sometimes there is stuff that needs to be fixed. But I think we as fundamental people don't need to use meditation to heal us. I think meditation helps us become aware of what's already there. But then it takes real knowledge and practice to recognize those things, right? This is where you might need like another teacher to help you go deeper in the experience. The teacher will be like, okay, we talk about impermanence, like you're not these things. And then you'll cultivate certain states and qualities like compassion, loving kindness, empathy, joy. And then even then, when you get to a place where you feel like, oh, I'm much better than I used to be, the teacher will be like, well, you are not that person now. You can't identify with that. And so, yeah, I think I caution people to not get into meditation as a way to heal themselves, but as a way to get to know themselves. And I think that process, paradoxically, will be healing, right? Because you'll realize just how beautiful and wonderful and full you actually are, and that you're a good person. You don't need anyone else to tell you about it. You don't need a meditation practice to show it, but it's already there. And you will know intrinsically at certain points what you need to do. That'll just be the clarity of your mind that emerges from the stillness.
Yeah, that is so beautiful and such a beautiful way to put it. I've never quite heard it put like that. And I think you exactly harness the essence of it there. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So in terms of someone getting their routine in place, I know I was always very hard on myself if I wasn't meditating every day, that I wasn't kind of worthy of it. I've since broken past that story. But it can be really hard to solidify a routine in our daily lives, in our busy lives. If we've got children, if we start work early, whatever it is, there's always something that pops up. And also I find that sometimes it's like, I feel like if I go and sit for 10 minutes, I'm like, am I just doing this to like tick it off my checklist, my morning routine checklist, or am I like really connected to it? So I think it's really finding this balance in our crazy lives. How do you think, or how do you recommend people find routine and structure, but also fluidity with it?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. There's pre-kids and post-kids. I think, pre-kids, or when your kids, are old enough where you can do it, having a routine is really important because it gives it structure. And structure, especially for people that have anxiety, ADHD, is really important. But it also helps solidify what you're practicing and learning, right? It gives you this checkpoint every day, which sets you up for the next 24 hours or 18 hours or whatever it is. So the morning, as soon as you wake up, for most people, is when they are the clearest in the mind. It's also when they have the most energy. So the first thing I do is meditate. Like I don't, check my phone. I don't work out. I drink a glass of water. I sit down, I meditate, and then it's done. I don't have to I don't have to debate with myself. Should I meditate? It's just done. And then what you hope is that what you learned in that meditation, you pick up on throughout your day. So, the reason we pay attention to the breath and bring it back without judgment is because throughout the day, our minds will be distracted. And if we want to be paying attention to our child, we want to give ourselves attention to a child. So then at that moment, when we notice, okay, I want to check my phone, but the baby needs my attention, you're doing the exact same thing as if you were when you're meditating, which is bringing your attention back to where you need it to be without judgment. You know, you're not there going, oh, I'm such a bad mom or dad, or I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, no, mine's wanted, come back. Mine's wanted, come back. And that builds over time, it compounds. So you become more present in your life. It becomes automatic, right? It becomes something that just happens. And so I use this analogy a lot, commas and full stops. Full stops are like your meditation practice where you formally sit, you do what you need to do for 5, 10, 20, however long you can do. And then the commas are those little moments throughout the day where you're going for a walk with your baby and you're just taking in the sights, you're smelling the flowers, you're noticing how the wind touches your skin. Those are mindful moments, like your partner when he goes for a run. Like that's a comma. Like it's like he's paying attention to that, provided he's not like blasting music and having conversations.
He's probably doing that too.
Yeah. But if he's like really present and engaged and in his senses, then he's having one of those comma moments.
I love that so much. You've definitely inspired me to get back into my structure with it.
Yeah, but it's actually the other part of that is post having a child, right? And structure kind of goes all over the place. And then what I would suggest from my experience again is just finding the moments you can do it. And sometimes it's like you're putting the baby to sleep, you know, and you're just noticing the baby's heartbeat, or you're noticing your heartbeat. You're noticing the feeling of your feet on the carpet. Like these moments, like they can be 30 seconds, or you take like 3 deep breaths and you really notice those breaths and you do the best you can. Like that's really what it comes down to.
I found breastfeeding is a fantastic moment to do that. That's when I've managed to find some real stillness.
Amazing.
Connecting to her and myself. Such good advice and such good tips.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been so rich and full of so much wisdom. I do love to end my episodes with a little verbal entry in the Tess Book's diary. This is just like one piece of wisdom, advice, or a quote that you'd love to leave behind with the listeners. You've already given us a few, but do you have a lasting thought?
A lasting thought. I mean, I think I'll just reshare Pema Chodron's eternally valuable quote, which is, you know, you are not the weather. You are, you are, I knew I was going to fuck it up. You are the sky. Everything else is the weather, is what she said. And so that everything else is all the negative aspects of your life, the things that you think are bad, your thoughts, your experiences. I think when we look back, those things can end up being lessons and beautiful moments. But if you can sit with that awareness of, okay, in this moment, this is just the weather, it's passing, it's changing, it's not who I am, then I think that gives you a lot of grace in times that are challenging.
So beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tess.
Thanks so much for listening. If you loved the episode, please subscribe, rate and review. It honestly means so much and helps to keep these conversations going. And I'd love to connect with you. You can message me on Instagram or TikTok, and I've left all the details from the episode in the show notes below. I'll see you next week.